should the Steelers consider drafting the heir to Big Ben's spot? Jordan Love would be interesting. Perry, thank you so much for getting involved here. Marcus Spears back here with us. Stephen A., it's your team. You're up first. What do you think?
I think they should. There's no question about that. Ben Roethlisberger is 37 years of age. That's Father Time. I mean, I still think he's got a couple of great years left in him, but he's still, assuming that he's going to have the requisite weapons to throw the football to, but he's still 37 years of age, and we can't ignore that. If I remember correctly, didn't the Steelers give up their first-round pick for Micah Fitzpatrick to Miami? I believe so. So I don't believe they pick until 49th, if I remember correctly. Assuming that's true, we got to sit up there and look reasonably. We heard about Jalen Hurts potentially being available for them to grab, particularly if they move up a little bit. I don't know whether it's Jacob Eason out of Washington, Jake Fromm out of Georgia. You just never know, but it's clear they need to get somebody else because relying on Mason Rudolph or Devlin Hodges ain't going to cut it. I'm sorry. I was not a fan of Mason Rudolph. He made more headlines with his beef with Cleveland on Thursday Night Football than he ever did as a quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers throwing the football. So I'm certainly not sold on him. And Devlin Hodges, I like his moxie. He can play, but he's relatively small and that arm strength is questionable. They clearly need another quarterback in Pittsburgh, somebody with some athleticism and preferably speaking, a strong arm. I don't know whether that's Fromm, Spears, or this kid Eason, who I know has a strong arm, but he's still raw, got a lot of developing to do, or whatever the case may be. But they definitely need to bring in a quarterback, particularly since your defense looks so much stronger last season than it did in previous seasons. Clearly, offense is the way to go, and your question mark is at that quarterback position in order to ensure. They had any kind of backup, they might have went better than 8-8 and made the damn playoffs last year.
I think they could draft a quarterback, but only if they really like him and not with the first pick that they have, especially if a guy like, as I mentioned earlier, Jonathan Taylor is available, because you give him the special running back with that offense, and Pittsburgh could be very dangerous. Yes, Ben Roethlisberger needs a young replacement to be groomed eventually, but in terms of the backup, Steve, they won 8 games without really a backup last year. Hodges looked pretty good in spots. And so Tomlin has shown the ability to keep them, give them a competitive season, even when there's no one there at, under center, really. I think if they see a guy in the later rounds where they're like, we really like this kid and we think we can develop him, fine, you take him. But otherwise, you could just do it next year. In the meantime, Pittsburgh should be in win-now mode. And you can't spend a valuable draft pick on a replacement for Ben Roethlisberger, particularly when you're not drafting very high up. Maybe you could say, hey, Tua fell to them or something. Sure, you take him, sure. But not just the guy who may be a project anyway, because you could find him in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds, not with your first pick.
Max, I'm with you there. And Stephen A., therein lies my problem. Even if you draft in one of these guys as a succession plan, are they really that? Do you view them as guys that can take you into your franchise into the future? The problem with drafting a quarterback for Pittsburgh at this point is, if you do, now you have 4 on the roster. You're going to get rid of one, either Mason Rudolph or Doug Hodges, and you don't know if Big Ben is going to go down. So are you going to go with the guy that was there, who I would think would be Mason Rudolph, because they drafted him fairly high a year ago? The issue with Pittsburgh is not at quarterback. The issue is if Ben gets hurt. So I wouldn't reach far, but I'm with Max on later. Like later, that's a real possibility, because you don't have as much capital tied up. You don't have the perceived succession plan to your franchise. You play this year, you see how it goes. If you don't have a successful year, you may be in position to draft a guy early. If you do have a successful year and Ben stays healthy, that only prolongs your opportunity to identify somebody. And then don't forget, guys, there's trade possibilities too. It's still 2 quarterbacks out there in Jameis Winston and Cam Newton that may be available for Pittsburgh to make a run at.
Well, I'm shoving aside the trade situation. Not that it's not real, but we're just talking about the draft itself. Of course, there's other ways to acquire a quarterback, so I'm not debating that, Marcus. But I want to challenge your football point, and then I'll just defer to you. I'm looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Defensively, they look stout. okay, particularly since they acquired Minkah Fitzpatrick. So when we look at their defense, we say, okay, they're good to go. And they drafted that cat out of Michigan as well, who did some good things for them last year. Okay, so now we get to the offensive side of the ball. James Conner is a question mark, but we've religiously talked about you can find a running back in the later rounds, particularly if your offensive line is stout, because if guys are creating holes for running backs, you know how to find holes. You can be productive. James Conner has proven that, because I think he's good but not great. You got questions about Juju Smith-Schuster, even because he's your number one now that Antonio Brown is not there, but he can still play. You still got James Washington. You acquired Eric Ebron to pair him with Vance McDonald, so you got 2 tight ends. If Big Ben Roethlisberger comes back with that, Marcus, then chances are they're going to be significantly better and therefore in no position to get a quarterback the quality of what they might be able to get in the second round right now. That's where I challenge it. I don't perceive the Steelers getting worse in the future. I think they're going to get better. Their draft picks are going to be lower as a result of it, and the prime opportunity that they may have available for them to get a quality quarterback might not be there. So why not take it now, particularly when it's a second rounder, and you can look at that person with Big Ben Roethlisberger behind center and justify saying to him, okay, let's work with you for the next couple of years, and you wait your turn. It's easier to do that with a second rounder or lower than it might be to do in the future, in my estimation. Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming, sports, and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.